Retro Warriors episode 278. Woo! As always, I'm your host, Justin Baker, and as always, I'm joined by resident old bastard Chris Saturn.
As always.
Saturn, we have some housekeeping. First up, as always, you can check for timestamps to jump to the topic in the episode description.
That's
also, I don't want to discuss it, obviously, but just to kind of preemptively give an excuse, we are recording this in the midst of the U.S. presidential election.
Right.
So we're sorry if we sound exhausted or weird. It's been a weird week for a lot of Americans.
Right.
And that's
possibly People International. We don't know.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's been a weird week for a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
That we will not discuss.
Also, I've been sick for most of the week, so I'm just drained. I'm physically and emotionally drained.
So just if we sound tired or weird or not ourselves, it's just been a hell of a few days and looks like it will be at least a hell of a few more days.
Also, Justin's been beating me, and
I do hit him. Well, I can't hit him. I have to pay someone to hit him for me because he lives far away.
Well, he set up a series of robot arms in my apartment.
It's like those little balls that hang on a string, like the little desk ornament. I have one end at my house, another end at your house, and I let it go, and it snaps off the other end and hits you in the face. It's 40 miles of that down the highway. I have been playing video games.
What?
I swear I have.
Yeah.
I've been playing 2 Point Hospital, which I've kind of not really been like getting into, like I'm playing hours of it, but it's kind of become my like I'm sitting at the computer and I want to play a game, but I don't know what game I want to play kind of game. And the role that like city builders used to fill for me.
Right.
I've been playing 2 Point Hospital because it's a very fun game and I like it a whole lot.
Nice.
And they just recently added some Sega 60th anniversary items. So I have like a little Outrun cabinet and a big statue of the mammoth Cyclops from Space Harrier, you know, in my hospital.
That's where they go.
And I keep desperately trying to basically build an arcade, but people just keep showing up sick and dying and wanting me to cure them instead. But I'm like, no, look at all these arcade machines I put in. So I've got like one doctor and there's like 50 people waiting and they're all slowly dying, but they're really entertained. And honestly, it just makes me really wish that that someone would make a good like arcade management game.
Yeah.
Like where you run an arcade, you have to put in different cabinets and bring in your money. You got a snack counter. It just sounds awesome.
And then just watch the arcade industry die as the 2000s start.
Yeah, well, maybe we won't go that far, Saturn. Maybe we'll play, up to like the late
80s
Street Fighter 2
simulator.
era. In my head, I was like, man, Sega could do it too because there's enough Sega arcade games that they could easily pack an arcade management game full of their titles, you know.
Right.
But I've been trying to force 2 Point Hospital to be that, and it's not. But it is also a fun hospital simulator game.
Right.
Anyone looking for a very chill, enjoyable management game, I highly recommend that one. I've been looking for good management games and trying to get away from city builders because it feels like all modern city builders are really traffic simulators.
Yeah.
And I don't like that.
Right.
Like Cities Skylines, I'll play it just until I reach the point where it's like, okay, your city's pretty well developed. You have to manage traffic now. And I'm like, well, I don't want to, I'm not here to manage traffic.
See, I really enjoy the traffic management part of it. That was one of my favorite parts of SimCity 4, but I really hate the actually trying to convince people to move their part. Like
I'm the opposite. We should build a city together, Saturn.
We should.
You could be my civil engineer, and I'll get the people moved in, everything's zoned. I like that part.
Right.
I like zoning and balancing the zones. I like that a whole lot.
I'll set up your public transit system.
There you go. Because I can't stand the traffic. I don't mind it to a point. Like when it's just like, oh, we need a highway here, okay. But when it's like, all right, I've got 3 different zones crunched in on each other, and I've got like this much traffic coming through, and I need to figure out a way to make it divert over here where they're trying to go without causing a buildup. I check out. It exits the realm of just casually clicking around and playing a game and enters the realm of like doing math. I'm like, no thanks. Puzzle. I've also been playing Gradius Galaxies.
Yeah.
Which is a game I got from you a while back.
Right.
And I played like half of the first level and died and went, it's Gradius, and I put it up. And I took it out and have been really putting some time in on it. And man, it is just such a good Gradius game,
yeah.
and it is so different from other Gradius games.
Right?
Like very different. I was really just expecting Gradius 1, but on GBA is what I went into it expecting, and it is very much not that.
Oh, yeah.
It does a lot of things that I've not seen in any other titles in that series, which is really cool and interesting, and I've been having a good time with it, and I hopefully can beat it sometime this century because it's very hard.
Yeah, I had picked that one up on a whim because it was dirt cheap and it was Gradius, and found myself enjoying it way more than I expected.
Yeah, having a very good time with that. That's about all I've been playing.
Nice
myself.
I don't remember if I mentioned it on the show a few weeks ago, but I had finally got around to actually playing Project High Rise.
Mm-hmm. You talked about it so much in Discord that I can't remember if you mentioned it on the
either.
show.
But it's very, very much Sim Tower, and I love that. That's great. It just feels like a modernized version of it. It does have a little more micromanagement than old-fashioned Sim Tower does, and that you also have to run power to units and potentially other things later, like water, gas, telephone, etc.
I don't know that something as hands-off as the original Sim Tower would fly these days on Steam. Like, I enjoy that, but I know that in the realm of management games, people like them a little bit more hands-on than they used to back in the day.
I was surprised, at least in the early game, there is very little traffic management, which is one of the biggest parts of Sim Tower, is you're constantly trying to figure out how to put in enough elevators to service everyone, because everybody complains about the elevators seconds into the game. Whereas in Project High Rise, just with that one elevator shaft, I was able to get a pretty good building going. And one thing I really like about it is right on the title screen when you're naming your new tower and starting your save file, there's a check mark right there that says unlimited money and unlock everything instantly. And
perfect.
Right? So if you aren't looking for the challenge, if you're just wanting to sculpt your tower that you want to sculpt, if you just want the creative mode, it's right there. They just give it to you. You don't have to put in a cheat code or anything. It's just available, which is
always
nice.
Appreciated. Oh, I've also been playing Deus Ex, more of that one, the second one, Mankind Divided.
Yeah.
I finally figured out how Cheat Engine works, so I'm doing great in that game now.
It's actually
100%.
the fourth game in the series.
It's I guess it would be the fourth one.
Right.
The second game in the current iteration.
Series, yeah. Current-ish.
Because I kept trying to look up cheats and there aren't any cheats, so I figured out Cheat Engine.
Nice.
And have been
just
cheating
updated my cheat engine.
I
also I'm still picking away at Cold Steel 4, which is excellent. And also I encountered an enemy named Magnum Dong, and that just that was great. That was the best. Great translation. And also I got a new phone, so I've been playing with that a lot. I upgraded to the Pixel 5, which is neat, and it feels nice. It is much smaller than what I'm coming from.
Because you had the XL before,
I had
right?
the 2XL, and I'm going to the 5, which doesn't come in an XL.
I know you meant 2XL as in the second one, extra large size, but I read it as like double XL, and I was like, geez, how big was that?
It's a 9-inch phone. Had to use 2 pockets.
13-inch phablet. It's great.
It's just a Microsoft Surface that has 4G. But no, the new phone has 5G, but I don't know that I have 5G towers around here, and I might. Who the fuck knows? I'm always on Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
But it works. It's a nice phone. I'm liking it.
Well, let's knock some news out because there's a lot of it.
Yeah.
First up, Guilty Gear Accent Core Plus R, which for people not keeping up with their Guilty Gear naming scheme is the 2012 game.
Yeah.
Surpasses Street Fighter V, Tekken 7, and Dragon Ball Fighter Z on PC following rollback netcode implementation.
Nice. I'm taking it that means
very good.
I take it that means surpassed it in current players, not in total sales.
Right. In concurrent players, it surpassed those games.
Nice.
Because and I did a little bit of reading in the FGC. I don't follow the fighting game community closely, but when this news broke, I was reading comments to see kind of what people were saying. And people were very excited that they would basically retroactively add
the rollback
better net code to one of these games. But additionally, people were complaining about netcode of the other games it's being compared to, saying that its netcode is better than these other games.
Yeah.
So it's been interesting to watch.
Nice.
Yuji Horii teases various announcements for the 35th anniversary of Dragon Quest in 2021.
So we're going to get 3 Japanese exclusive art books.
I was thinking some stamps.
Maybe.
And a coin purse and one of those Hobonichi planners.
And a mobile gacha game.
And a mobile gacha game.
Speaking of, actually, I did try out the demo of Dragon Quest XI on Xbox One X.
Oh, I hear it's butt from you.
No, it's fine. It's just, it doesn't look as good as the original PS4 Steam release.
Why wouldn't it?
Because they ported it from the Switch.
They don't just like have those original assets that they could put in there?
But they ported it from the Switch.
God damn it. To be fair, a lot of detractors when the Switch came out were saying that they were upset preemptively because they were going to get dumbed down versions of games that were just Switch ports because developers are lazy. And yeah, they sure didn't they?
Yeah. It's still fine. It's still the full game. It still has all the bonus shit that was added to the Switch version, which is nice. But, you know.
Metal Slug 6 ported to the Dreamcast by Megavolt 85. Metal Slug 6 uses SNK's Atomis Wave hardware, which was developed in conjunction with Sega and is very close to the Naomi hardware that the Dreamcast was based on, which is what made this port possible in the first place.
Yeah.
So that's cool. I wish it, was a better game, but you can still play Metal Slug 6 on your Dreamcast now, which is pretty neat.
Yeah.
YouTuber John Glasscock discovers ability to undelete PS1 saves after deletion. Now, I watched this video, and in the video, he was saying, nobody knew this. It's not in the manual. This is undocumented functionality
I totally remember
of the
hearing
PS1.
about this in the 90s.
Yeah. And I was one, because I tried to Google it to see if anyone else was talking. Nobody else was, but then I also couldn't find anyone confirming it.
No, this was in tips and tricks back in the 90s.
So maybe, let's say, reconfirms the ability to undelete PS1 saves after deletion.
Brings attention to it.
You press all the shoulder buttons at the same time, but it only works if you just deleted your save and you're still in the save manager, which, why are you in there deleting your saves if you don't want them deleted anyway? But
I guess it's if you accidentally deleted the wrong one.
I suppose.
Yeah.
Raspberry Pi 400 releases. They released 400 of these things now.
Man, already.
Way behind. I know. Last one I had was the 4.
I'm still on the 281.
396 behind. It features a full Raspberry Pi 4 4GB built into a keyboard for $70 standalone or $100 as a full kit.
Now, I heard this is actually different than the standard Raspberry Pi 4 hardware. Like, it's slightly more powerful.
The CPU is slightly more powerful. That much we know for sure. Right. My only real big question is cooling.
Yeah.
Because the Pi 4 needs active cooling.
Right.
But this board, the board it is on, and so to clarify, it's not just a Raspberry Pi 4 put into a Raspberry Pi keyboard.
Right.
It is a different board entirely.
Right. Designed to fit the keyboard.
It is the size of the width of the keyboard. So I'm hoping spacing everything out dissipates heat a little bit better.
Right.
I'm very excited for it because it's very reminiscent of like old school microcomputers.
Right.
I've been racking my brain for days. I cannot find an excuse to spend $100 on this thing, but man, I want to so bad. It's really cool.
Well, they handle the cooling because they expect you to use it in a freezer.
Oh, see, there you go. Perfect. They were just going to sell it to people in Alaska.
Right.
And they thought it'd be fun.
People in the refrigerated goods industry.
Yeah. Sony's PS5 DualSense controller does not work on the PS4 natively, but does work on the PlayStation 3 natively.
Well, the reason for that, my assumption anyway, is the PS3 will read a lot of Bluetooth controllers. They don't have to be proper Bluetooth controllers. And it'll just let you use them. So I'm guessing it just sees it as generic Bluetooth because somebody already said that it doesn't support the home button, but it supports everything else. And that's how standard Bluetooth controllers work on the PS3.
On PS3.
You can do the same thing with a DualShock 4 on a PS3. You can sync it up, but it just sees it as a generic Bluetooth controller and the home button doesn't work.
Yeah. Custom PS5 faceplate seller forced to cancel all pre-orders after legal threat from Sony after previously being forced to change their website name from PlateStation 5 to Customize My Plates.
Thanks, Sony. Good job.
It's a little disconcerting that a company would sell someone making third-party accessories,
Right.
That they would shut them down so hard. That's
really
I don't like the precedent that sets.
Yeah, me either.
Activision Blizzard made $1.2 billion with a B dollars from microtransactions in the July to September period, with most of the credit going to Call of Duty.
Gasp.
So for people like myself that keep going, hey man, this microtransaction thing, maybe it's going to peter out one day. $1.2 billion disagrees with me.
Yeah.
So.
Unfortunately, that was less microtransactions than they expected, which is why they had to shut down their branch in France, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't. If we're trying to equate how well a company's doing with how often they lay off employees, then, I mean, come on, Saturn. They got to pay those bonuses.
Oh, yeah,
you know.
My bad.
Bobby Kotick needs his money. GameStop starts TikTok social media competition for employees to win 10 extra labor hours during the holidays, or during Black Friday, I believe it said it was.
Black Friday specifically.
Although it was unclear what winning 10 hours even means. Is it vacation time? Is it 10 more hours?
So somebody, this is secondhand from an internet forum, but supposedly a GameStop manager clarified, saying that he was told it is 10 hours allotted to the store's budget for that week, meaning that they can schedule 10 more employee hours that week.
That's almost worse than it being vacation time.
Right. It just means that somebody who wouldn't have been able to work before can now work more.
The contest was subsequently removed because it's both disgusting and stupid.
Yes.
Which is the opposite of loot boxes, which are ethical and fun.
But not until after some sample videos were released to YouTube.
Yeah, I don't recommend watching those. Awesome Games Done Quick 2021 will feature Celeste speedruns played on dance pads.
Because why not?
You know what? Whatever keeps you fit. You know, it's hard times. You know.
Oh, I think you'd die.
Pikmin 3 Deluxe Physical performs worse than the Wii U version of the game during opening week in the UK.
However, I did read elsewhere that the Japanese release of Pikmin 3 outdid expectations and was the top-selling game of the week.
I do wonder because the UK, I believe, just started new lockdowns. So I'm wondering if that might be affecting, because they only were reporting on physical. They didn't say anything about digital. So
it could be affecting that.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering that. Sega Sammy will be selling all of their arcade operations in Japan and leaving the arcade business by the end of 2020, according to Yahoo Japan. Sega subsequently asks 650 employees to voluntarily retire and cuts executive salaries. I will say that the most damning thing to hear as far as how good is a company doing is that they're cutting executive salaries.
Right.
Because they do that one last.
Yeah.
That's the oh shit maneuver. You know, they eject everyone, they sell everyone, everything, and then they go, oh no, we have to make less money now.
Right. Now, it felt like Sega was doing really well, too.
And they just announced that fog gaming thing, and
maybe not their arcade division, but
their
their home game publishing division seems like it's been doing pretty well lately.
I have a feeling they just want out of arcades, although it is sad because Sega is one of the last few remaining bastions of the modern arcade, and there is still a modern arcade. There is still stuff coming out.
Yeah.
But it seems to be either exclusively like Sega stuff or like phone games put onto giant touch screens and
there's
put
also
in an arcade.
Bandai Namco is still doing stuff.
That's true.
And there's some company, I can't remember their name, that's just like out of left field, and they keep licensing other companies' games. Like they licensed Space Invaders from Square Enix and made this massive Space Invaders machine.
I have seen those, and it's like a weird LED screen.
Yeah.
Like the screen is comprised of a bunch of LEDs and the whole thing vibrates. It's very fun.
Yeah, and they also licensed Tomb Raider and made a light gun game based on Tomb Raider for arcades.
I will say, as someone who, before the pandemic started, went to Chuck E. Cheese and children's arcade play zones frequently, nobody ever played that Space Invaders game.
Oh,
except for me. I played it.
That was
Me
the
and my
first
kid
thing
love
I
it.
went to when I saw it at the
It's a lot
round
of
one
fun.
around here.
And it has like new power-ups and stuff.
Yeah.
I thought it was good.
It's really neat.
Super Mario 3D All-Stars sold 5.21 million copies in 12 days.
Well, that's good because in 6 months it'll sell no copies.
So another example of Nintendo saying, no, we don't need the money.
Right.
Dragon Quest 3 ported to XL somehow.
I like that halfway through moving from Eliahan to Reeve and his little demo of showing off how it works, he encounters a dolphin that like one hit kills his entire level 99 party. I have no idea what the text read because it was not standard Dragon Quest text, but it was a neat tech demo.
New Dizzy game coming from the Oliver twins coming out on Switch. Dizzy is a tiny egg.
Yes, for
they
anybody
like
not in Europe.
Yeah, they like a lot more in UK and European territories than we do here.
Right.
But it was a microcomputer game.
Well, we
over
also
there.
saw it on NES and Genesis over here.
True, no one played those, but we
Right.
saw
Well,
it.
that's because it was very expensive on both because you had to have the fancy cartridge adapter thing, the Aladdin deck enhancer,
right.
to play
The
it on.
Aladdin deck enhancer.
Right. Now, they made a standalone cartridge of it, but it was one of those weird unlicensed cartridges, and not all stores
Wasn't it
carried
exceedingly rare?
it became exceedingly rare. For years, it just languished on Blockbuster video shelves.
Doom ported to Sonic Mania.
Why not?
I guess we ran out of hardware to put Doom on, so now we're porting it inside of other games.
Right. Isn't that
you know
really
what?
just modding a game at that point?
I don't know what the difference is, but a couple weeks ago it was running on a pregnancy test.
Right.
Now it's in Sonic Mania.
Yeah.
Pretty soon they're just gonna like port it to the inside of our brains. I'm just waiting for someone to come up with a Doom shot that just puts it in your body.
A couple of years ago, at one of the GDQ events, they had set it up so that somehow TaskBot was making an NES play an N64. And it was through the controller port, it was programming all the visuals of what the N64 was rendering and displaying it on a screen that an NES was hooked up to. And I'm waiting for somebody to play Doom that way, just so that the
Right.
NES could play Doom.
1 terabyte of, quote, sensitive data stolen in cyber attack on Capcom. I don't believe they've disclosed what was in the sensitive data.
It was,
But,
it was a bunch
that
of pics
sucks.
of Jill Valentine from Resident Evil. Very sensitive.
Square Enix reporting a 6.5 is that a B? 6.5 billion yen loss
Right.
on Avengers, the third-person action game that they put out recently.
Yeah, the estimation based on that is that that they hit about 60% of what they were trying to hit in sales for the game.
That game did not seem to perform well with critics, so I can't say I'm too incredibly surprised. And it also previewed very poorly.
And the few people that I know that were excited for it and did pick it up seemed to fall out of favor with it faster than I expected.
Yeah, it turns out spending $100 billion on a generic third-person action game isn't a fantastic idea.
Right.
But yeah. Anyway, that brings us to our topic at hand. This week we're talking GBA on a budget.
Now, explain for me, what's GBA?
Well, it's the Game Boy, but it's advanced.
Oh, shit.
I know. They made it better, Saturn. For people that listen to our other on a budget episode, so far this was only our second one. As far as synopsis, we're basically going to be discussing the Game Boy Advance, how you might get into the hardware and the system and potentially collecting for it, or at the very least playing games on the system for various price points.
Right.
The idea being that you can jump in wherever you want.
Right.
And we'll let you know what your options are to a point, because there's a lot of options for this one. First up, listener feedback. Elk Neo Daffs writes in and says, Nintendo has always been peripheral happy, but with the Game Boy Advance, it reached a fever pitch.
That's true.
The problem is all of the peripherals fly in the face of GBA on a budget. To truly solve this, emulate. GBA emulation is very good right now, though you might lose the ability to use certain peripherals. You gain the ability to play games like Mother 3 and Oriental Blue, and that's a trade I'm willing to make.
It's fair.
Rygar Starkong writes in, the GBA came out at the tail end of my gaming hiatus, so I missed out on it. My little sister had one that I played A little bit, but her game collection consisted of Spyro and Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets was a tremendously popular GBA game.
Yeah. Yeah, I did sell a lot of copies of that.
I mean, it has to have been one of the top sellers on the system total. So I never paid much attention. It was only later that I discovered that I'd missed out on some truly fantastic games. Looking forward to hearing your suggestions. Nice. And for where we normally have our personal histories, I just kind of want to put in our personal GBA setups, the way we play GBA games when we decide to do so, which for me is always and for you is never. I still play most of my GBA games on an original all-stock AGS 101 GBA SP.
Yeah.
And before we jump in all the options, I'll go over the different model types.
Yeah.
But I also have an IPS modded original GBA, multiple DS lights, an original model DS, and a GBA player on my GameCube. And I also have RetroFlag's GPI case and many, many, many ways to emulate GBA games. Yeah, but my go-to currently is still my AGS 101, which we'll get into details of why later.
Yeah, for me, I still have my NES Classic Edition SP, which I only ever use for Pac-Man Versus, so I don't even use it for GBA games. If I'm going to play a proper GBA cart, I will either play it on my DS Lite or on my GameCube Game Boy player on my TV, just because I am not much of a handheld person. But if I'm going to, the DS Lite is just fine for me.
Right. As far as scope, it should bear mentioning that these are not the only options available for GBA. There are so many ways and so many handhelds and so many third-party devices and programs that these are really just our specific recommendations per price point. It's things that we either know about or have experience with. This is not the only way to do all of this. And before we jump into it, I did just want to run down very briefly. As far as GBA goes, there are four major models. You have the original model GBA, which was not backlit. But since in recent years, people have come up with a way to mod an IPS, a modern display that is backlit into it.
Even when it was new, there were mods for it. There was that Afterburner mod, was very popular back then.
And then people were putting AGS 101 screens, and those eventually got tremendously scarce and expensive. But right now, if you're looking to backlight an original model GBA, you're looking at an IPS screen. They're about $50.
Right.
Then you have the AGS 001, which is the very first model of GBA that came out that was the clamshell, the SP design.
Right.
And the backlight on that was there, but it was very washed out. It was very poor quality. You could see it-ish, but it wasn't great, except for really in the darkest of environments. And then you have the AGS 101, which is the same GBA SP design that has a much improved light because it's backlit. I believe the AGS 001 is front lit.
Correct. Yeah.
And the 101 has kind of remained the gold standard. They also released the Game Boy Micro, which was teeny tiny, had like a 1.2 inch screen, something like that.
Sounds about right.
Or maybe 2 inches. I might be mixing it up with the Game Gear Mini.
That was a 0.12 inch screen.
It came out very late. It only plays GBA games. And I have one, and comparing it directly to my AGS 101 screen, it looks better than the 001, and it's certainly better than a non-backlit screen, but it looks significantly more washed out than the AGS 101 or even the DS Lite screen. So just to kind of give a rundown of the different official GBA hardware.
Yeah, and I never bothered with the Micro just because it was no Game Boy or Game Boy Color compatibility.
Right. So it limits your functionality. So let's talk money. My first option here is at about the $400 range, which is pretty high, but just like we did on our last episode, we did like this. I'm thinking you're getting a new console. $400 is how much you'd spend on buying a new PlayStation or a new Xbox or whatever. And we're talking, I want to get into a new console levels of money. So it seems like a fair number to start around $400. Like if you were to buy a Switch in a game, you're at about $400.
Yeah, give or take.
And this is kind of the all-in, I want the best and more importantly, most versatile setup that is the nicest and can do everything. And my lineup is the Analog Pocket, if you can get the damn thing, which is Analog's upcoming all aluminum 4K screen, very nice looking handheld that plays all types of Game Boy games natively.
Right. And with an adapter can play other handheld games.
Yep. And it's FPGA.
Right.
I would probably also, if you're again going for the all-in versatility option, pick up the Analog Pocket Dock, which is a little high at $100, but it lets you play on your TV with Bluetooth controllers.
Right.
And then I also threw this one in here, but this one's kind of weird. There are EverDrives for the GBA that you can just load every ROM on.
Right.
And the big one, the popular one, the best one right now is the GBA X5 Mini EverDrive. Okay. There are lots of knockoff brands and cheaper brands around the $40 range, but they do drain a lot more battery, as we've discovered. So it's something to keep in mind.
And I don't know if this is still an issue or not, but I know with older flash carts for the GBA, there was game compatibility issues. Like
those have largely been remedied. Obviously, the GBA did some weird shit, so you're going to sometimes run into issues.
Right.
It's very likely that the Analog Pocket will be jailbroken and you can just play ROMs off of removable media, but we can't account for that yet in our estimation. If that happens, then obviously you wouldn't need to spend the $100 on the EverDrive.
Right.
So this is really the all-new hardware with a warranty, fully functional, can play everything out of the box with a wireless controller TV option.
Right.
At the $300 to $400 range, depending on whether or not you need the EverDrive. Right. The upside to this is that the Pocket is allegedly, again, going to play many systems with various adapters, which is, it's a big plus. The downside is, like we said, it's getting your hands on one of these things. Yeah. Pre-orders are sold out. Analog is hush-hush about future numbers and availability as usual.
Right.
And they still haven't said whether or not they intend for this to be something they keep in stock regularly.
And also one thing that we haven't really factored in yet is, if I remember right, this is the first time Analog has made their own controller of any type. Because they always just recommended 8-bit DOS controllers.
Yeah, there's a lot
systems.
of stuff came with 8-bit DOS controllers.
And this one has obviously built-in controls because it is a handheld. So as of now, we don't know what the quality of the controls are. We assume they are good because the rest of Analog's quality has been good so far.
They have a lot of problems. None of them have ever been bad hardware.
Right. So we don't definitively know, but we can assume that the controls will be good.
Option number 2 here, and this one is a little pricier, is a GBA SP AGS 101. Right. They're going to run you about $130. If you really fight those eBay battles, you can get it for about $115. But you got to really troll around on eBay a lot. You've got your GBA X5 Mini EverDrive because you want to play every game.
Naturally.
And then again, in these two options, our high dollar options, I wanted to include versatility to play on a TV.
Okay.
And that was a big one for me. And picking up a modded, you can pick up a modded GameCube with Swiss. Swiss is a piece of software that lets you run basically homebrew software.
Oh, okay. From what?
Because if you also pick up a GBA player for your GameCube, one, the GBA player itself, the hardware is cheap, but the boot disc for the GBA player is about $100.
Oh, shit.
Just for the boot disc.
Damn.
Now, here's the thing. GBA on GameCube is kind of a blurry mess. It doesn't look great. It doesn't look terrible, but if you're spending a bunch of money, it doesn't look fantastic.
It looks fine on my TV.
It looks fine. I would agree with that. Fine. It does look fine.
Yeah.
But instead of buying a $100 boot disc, you can just get your GameCube modded or buy a GameCube that's already modded for probably the cost of a GameCube and a player and a boot disc, and run Swiss, which lets you boot a homebrew GBA software that gives you way more options.
I've heard about that.
Razor sharp pixels. It looks better. It runs better. It's nicer.
Now, I thought I had read somewhere that you could run that homebrew GBA software from an Action Replay using a SD card to a memory card adapter.
You can as well. It's a little bit more of a process. And and I don't remember the exact details of it, but it is also an option.
And of course, you can also run it through a copy of Phantasy Star Online Episode 1 and 2 and a broadband adapter if you're an insane person.
Right. Now, picking up an action replay, they still make them new for the system. You can get them ordered from the UK. It costs you about $35 here in the States after shipping.
Crazy.
And I also recommend in this option a RAFnet controller. RAFnet makes controller adapters of all sorts, but you can pick one of those up that will let you use any number of controllers on your GameCube. Like they have one that is the classic controller connector, so you can use your SNES controllers on your GameCube to play your GBA games.
You're not going to recommend people pick up the official Hori Game Boy player
the Hori
controller?
one that is, I think, around the $115 range right now.
If we're going crazy with the price anyway.
Alternative to a modded GameCube with Swiss and a GBA player is a GBA consolizer.
Right.
This is from a person that goes by the handle Woozle at the website GameTech US.
And these are neat.
It's basically a GBA that they've turned into a console that has a Super Nintendo controller port on the front. The problem is it's $350 assembled.
Right. And that includes the guts from an original model GBA, correct?
Right. But the downside to this option is that a modded GameCube is also a modded GameCube.
Right.
And if you are wanting to play maybe GameCube games and GBA link cable functionality, because again, you're exploring the GBA, and part of that is that it had major connectivity with the GameCube.
Oh, yeah.
Then you might want to go the modded GameCube route, which is going to be in the $250 to $400 range for everything we had listed. The consolizer itself, again, is $350. So they're comparable, but I would go the more utilitarian route and get a modded GameCube if it were me.
Right. And you don't necessarily have to get a modded GameCube either. If you get one with a GBA player, I mean, you would have options to be able to play the GBA games.
Correct. But for the amount of money you'd pay for the GBA boot disc, you'd probably just take that money and put it into getting a modded GameCube, and then you can play games off of an SD card on one of the SD card adapters that goes in the broadband adapter, because Saturn, no one but you has a broadband adapter for their GameCube. They're $100.
The SD adapter goes in the broadband adapter?
It goes in the broadband adapter slot.
That's weird.
You can put an SD card. Yeah, there are some crazy GameCube mods. It's nuts right now.
That's crazy.
So option 2, to recap, a GBA SP AGS 101, $130, an EverDrive for it for $100, and a modded GameCube with a GBA player. You're looking at the $479 to $629 range. That is high, and I do want to note, quite a bit more expensive than the Analog Pocket and related accessories, because we've been talking about the Analog Pocket. Is it a good price? Is it a bad price? When you're looking at this as the alternative to get the same level of functionality, it's looking more attractive price-wise. But again, if you're like, hey, I want to play GameCube, this one also nets you a GameCube in the process.
Now, granted, if you're not intending on ever playing on a television, you can cut some cost off of both of those last two options.
Right. And that's what we start jumping into next. This is our $200 and under option. This is the, maybe I'm not insane, but I do want to play Game Boy
You are a little
Advance. I would personally recommend a GBA SP AGS 101, which is again about $130, an EverDrive for $100. You're going to be looking at about $230, which is immediately over the price I just noted. And I did go a bit over because, again, if you're really diligent, you can get an AGS 101 a little bit lower down, like maybe get one with some scratches on the outside or whatever, but the screens often look good. But this leaves you with what I consider the best official GBA hardware, which is the AGS 101.
Right.
I like it better than the Micro. It's way better than the original or the 001. There is a case to be made for a DS Lite instead of an AGS 101, which we will be talking about later on down in the list.
Now, what about the Game But Macro?
The Game Boy Macro would basically be a DS.
Yeah, it's just a modded
quality,
DS Lite.
Yeah, they broke the top off. But then there's also, again, you can get the original model GBAs with an IPS screen for around the same price as the stock AGS 101. But here are my issues with that. To begin with, I don't like the IPS screen as much as I like the AGS 101 screen. And it's for dumb reasons, because the IPS screen is an IPS screen. It looks great.
Right.
But it looks too great, if that makes sense. These are GBA games. You originally played them on this little, GBA screen, and having them on a IPS screen, it makes them look like they're running on an emulator, if that makes sense.
Well, the IPS screen is a higher resolution, right?
It is indeed.
Yeah.
And I don't know how it transcodes everything to make it work.
Right.
I've played so much on the SP model that it feels really weird playing on the IPS screen.
Right.
But that's just going to boil down to preference.
Sure.
There are some other considerations with a IPS modded GBA, though. One, in all likelihood, it is going to have replacement shell and or buttons. Now, for the shell, no big deal. But the replacement buttons I got with mine were terrible quality. I had to yank them out and put in original buttons from an original. Yeah. They really were that bad. They were weird, and they were really bulbous and hollow and cheap feeling.
That's unfortunate.
So that was upsetting. Also, the IPS screen is going to drain your battery way more on than it's going to go down faster than the AGS 101 does.
Now they've made rechargeable battery mods for it, haven't they?
They have indeed.
Yeah.
But then you're looking at replacement shell, replacement buttons, IPS screen mod, the cost of the original GBA hardware, and the battery mod. You're looking at a good chunk more money than you would spend on just an AGS 101.
Right.
Now, maybe you're the kind of person that you say, no, I love the form factor of the original. I want the IPS screen. Great. Go for it. It's going to look great, and it's going to be around the same price range. I personally have had better luck with the AGS 101 myself. And then that brings us to the $100 and under option.
This is my territory.
Which is... it's kind of a weird place. I keep including versatility as a big key factor in my options here. I really love versatility to begin with.
Right.
And two, if you're spending a bunch of money, I want you to be able to do multiple things with it than just play GBA games.
Which is fair.
And I'd say the versatile option here in the $100 and under slot is a Raspberry Pi 4, the 2 gigabyte with an SD card, an AC adapter, and just a basic controller is going to run you about $100. The weird part about this recommendation is that you want to get into a handheld, and I'm recommending it not a handheld.
Honestly, that's how I play most of my GBA games at this point, is via a Pi.
If you're someone like Saturn and you're like, no, I'm okay sitting in front of a TV looking at it on the big screen, then a Pi would work great. GBA emulation on a Pi 4 is handled superbly.
It works pretty well on a Pi 3 for 99% of the library.
Yeah, it's going to be great. So $100 or less, you can play GBA and every other type of Game Boy, PS1, Super Nintendo, NES, Lynx, whatever weird stuff you want.
Right.
And then the next option down drops down to about the $50 range. And originally I had a Pi Zero here because you can get a Pi Zero with an SD card and an AC adapter and a basic controller. The problem is the Pi Zero has trouble running GBA.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
It's not great. It's playable. I would say it's one of those things that it depends on what kind of titles you're wanting to play. If you're like, oh, I just want to play turn-based RPGs, great, awesome. It'll be great. But I had somehow completely forgotten about the humble DS Lite, which is still floating around the $50 mark. You do kind of have to shop a bit because you see them around $60, $70.
Right.
If you don't mind getting a pink one, you can get it for like $40.
Now the Game Boy Macro, which I joked about earlier, which is just a DS Lite with the top screen broken off, essentially.
It's a broken DS Lite, yes.
You can find some that have like these custom shells that make it look like there wasn't ever a top screen. And those are only in like the $70-ish range.
And the DS Lite is immediately I felt dumb for forgetting it, and then I was like, well, that's the perfect option. But there are some caveats that we'll cover in a minute. But it is a fantastic option. The screen on the DS Lite is, in my experience, superior to the AGS 101 screen in that it has less ghosting. Really noticeably less. If I'm being really honest, I've just played so much SP that I like the ghosting. Like it's part of the experience for me. So keep in mind the DS Lite is going to have a better screen. It's also able to play DS games, which is cool.
Yeah.
But the issue with it is that the DS Lite does seem to, first of all, be a tad less durable than the SP. People have long complained about the hinge on the DS Lite being its weak point, which is what eventually led to the Game Boy Macro design, because so many people had broken DS Lites.
I've also lost a shoulder button on my original DS that I had bought way back when it first came out.
Yep. There's no link cable port, so you will not be hooking it up to a GameCube. You will not be playing multiplayer.
Right.
And there are many GBA games that support single pack multiplayer. So just because you don't have two of the same game, as long as you got two systems that can somehow link up, you can still play a lot of stuff.
It's true.
The big one is that it only plays GBA games.
Right.
And I know that sounds like a dumb caveat in an episode entitled GBA on a budget.
But that is a huge part of its library, is Game Boy and Game Boy Color games.
Yeah. If you're looking to get into the Game Boy as a whole, then the DS Lite it's going to cut out most of that. You're going to play GBA and DS games, and that's going to be it.
That's still great. GBA and DS games are great.
If you're a hardcore Pokemon player, there is some connectivity between GBA and DS Pokemon games, I think just for Pokemon transfers, but it bears mentioning.
Nice.
And the other con is that this price point, I don't predict will stay here for long.
Right, probably not.
As the GBA continues to rise, the DS Lite will slowly start to rise with it. I'm even seeing original, non-backlit screen GBAs in decent condition selling for good chunks of money, and I only know that because I sold one of mine. I had to, and I sold one, and it sold for like $80.
Dang.
And I started it at like $1. I was like, I just want to sell one. It'll probably sell for $20-$30. Someone will part it out, mod it, whatever.
Right.
It sold for good money. And this is kind of one of those moments to realize that Nintendo hardware in good condition is a lot like old Apple hardware in good condition, in that it's going to always hold some value and maybe go up regardless of how good of an experience it is.
At least for now. There was a time period when Nintendo hardware was dropping in value.
Right.
Whether or not that ever comes back is unknown, but it doesn't look like it right now.
So the DS Lite is kind of a weird category. If you're just like, dude, I just want to play GBA games, and I've got a $50 bill, get a DS Lite. The problem with that price point is it doesn't include any games.
True.
But you can, I believe the X5 Mini should work on it because it just boots as regular GBA hardware. It's just got
think so, yeah.
GBA hardware inside of it.
Right.
If you included the cost of an EverDrive, you're looking at more like the $150 mark.
Now, of course, if you're looking at a DS anyway, you could always go with a DS flash card instead. And
also true.
Some of those can also boot GBA ROMs, and some of them come with a simple classic GBA flash cart that only holds one game, but it allows you to transfer them from the DS flash cart whenever you want to play them. And it backs up the save file.
So at $100 and less, there's a lot of options. The other thing to note is the original Model DS also does play GBA games.
It's true.
But the screen on it is pretty bad.
Yeah, it looks like butt.
Really, the three best screens in category, you're going to be looking at the DS Lite, the AGS 101, and those IPS modded screens. Those are ones that still look good today.
I remember I played through most of, I want to say it was Dawn of Souls on my original Fat DS. And I was like halfway through the Final Fantasy II when I realized my screen on my GBA actually looks better than my DS at the time. So I switched back.
Yeah. The original screen on the Fat Model DS is pretty rough.
Yeah.
And it's hard for me because I like the original Model DS, like legitimately like the design. As butt ugly as it is.
Yeah, it look like butt.
I like it.
Okay.
So then that brings us to the $10 and under range, which you're not going to be getting a lot of hardware for. You got your phone. If you have a phone, GBA emulators.
Justin, I just bought this phone. It is not $10, I assure you. This phone was way more.
How much do phones cost now? I don't even know.
This phone was $699.
Oh my God. You could get 7 GameCubes for that. If you already have a phone,
yes,
there are GBA emulators on Android, and yes, even on iOS, there are workaround websites that utilize web browser exploits to get GBA emulators working. Don't ask me how they work. I don't use iOS devices, but it's there.
Yeah.
Toss in a cheap controller for $10 and an OTG adapter, and you're in business. You're playing GBA games. Most phones are going to run GBA fine.
Oh, yeah.
Also, your computer, Windows, Mac, and Linux all have very good, very accurate GBA emulation across
Justin,
a litany of
I
cores.
paid way more than $10 for my computer.
You weren't issued one? I just assumed everyone was issued a phone and a laptop these days. I didn't. If you already have a computer, get just any cheapo Buffalo brand Super Nintendo controller for $10 or less, and you're good to go.
Right.
You're all set.
Or you could do what I used to do in the 90s and try to play games with your keyboard.
There you go.
Yeah.
If so, of our options, if I were to say, which one is my pick, which one do I think you should shoot for?
Yeah.
I'd say that if you really only want GBA, go DS Lite.
Right.
It's versatile. It's cheap. You can get real official original hardware for that amount of money.
Oh yeah.
It's a great option. The screen looks great. It's great.
Yeah.
If you are one, kind of rough on your devices, or two, you want to maybe explore Game Boy as the multiple platforms that it really is.
Right.
Or if you want to hook it up to your GameCube, or you have a friend that also has a Game Boy Advance and you want to play some games together, then go AGS 101 or IPS modded original, assuming you can ensure that you are getting decent quality buttons and shells
or
for your stuff.
If you are not, if the appearance of the screen is not your main selling point and you can handle a subpar screen, like if you're somebody who grew up with an old-fashioned original brick Game Boy and it was fine for you, the original Model SP is fine in that scenario.
I'll say this, it's only about $30 cheaper than the 101.
Oh, yeah?
I don't know that there's any instance that I would recommend the 001 over the 101 at a $30 difference.
I didn't realize there was that slim of a difference these days.
It is, yeah, because I sold my AGS 101 and it sold for like $100. For that small of a price difference, somewhere between $20 to $30 different, I can't see a reason to go for the 001.
Now, that said, I can't find a good reason to recommend the original model GBA without a screen mod.
Yeah, an unmodded original model GBA, trust me, I've tried very hard to enjoy them.
Yeah.
It's extremely difficult.
Oh, yeah. Some games are nearly unplayable on it.
Oh, yeah, because originally GBA games were designed with these very bright, almost like pastel palettes.
Some of them were.
Some of them, the ones that knew what they were doing were, because no one could fucking see the games.
No.
And then they came out with the SP, and then people stopped doing that.
Yeah.
Because then everything looked washed out on an actual lit screen.
Right.
So there is this weird kind of incongruity to the GBA library where some games, like if you're playing on an AGS 101, they look blasted out. And if you're playing on original hardware, you can't. Like Circle of the Moon was a launch title, and it was just a black screen.
Yeah, it was really painful to play. Also, just after the original model GBA came out, the Game Boy Color port of Dragon Quest III came out, and it had a big label on the box that said compatible with Game Boy Advance. And if you put that shit in a Game Boy Advance, you cannot see the fucking game. Like the first half of the game is okay, but anytime it's nighttime outside or if you're in the dark world, you can't see it. You can't see the game. It's impossible to play.
I can't think of an instance I would recommend the original model GBA without some type of screen or backlight mod.
Right.
No.
Or a worm light.
I'll also, God, the worm lights. Hey, you want to not see it, but also have tons of glare?
Yeah.
Yes, please. I can't wait.
There are also those weird magnification things.
Oh, yeah.
I had an adapter from Innovation that I had to open up my original GBA and install a ribbon cable that it gave it a S-video output to a TV.
I remember that.
So that I could just plug my GBA into my TV. That's the only way I finished Circle of the Moon, by the way, was plugged into my TV through S-video because my TV, surprisingly, was backlit.
It does also bear, I'd say the only weak point that bears mentioning about the AGS 101 is, one, the screen does have a little bit more ghosting than the DS Lite. So if you're one of those people that you're like, if I see ghosting, I'm very upset, maybe you want to lean DS Lite. But also, every model of GBA had some type of headphone issue. The SP had no headphone port, and you had to get an adapter.
Right. They were ahead of the curve there.
Yeah, the dongle. But even the original model GBA had a headphone port, but it was very low quality.
Yeah.
The GBA line is known, even the micro, it sounds like shit, my headphone jack on my micro.
The micro headphone jack?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought it
Didn't
also
it?
used the
Did it?
dongle.
No, maybe it doesn't. Maybe I'm just literally imagining that I used headphones on my micro. I could have sworn it did.
I thought it came with the dongle from the
Maybe
SP.
that's what I used.
I don't
I
remember.
could totally be imagining it now.
I have held a micro so few times in my life. I'm not the
No, you
expert
know what?
on
I think
this.
you're right. I think there is no headphone jack. I think I must just be thinking of my other SP. There is no Game Boy Advance branded hardware
Yeah.
that has good sounding headphone output.
Right.
So do not go into it expecting that. DS Lite, however, has a headphone jack.
Yeah.
And it sounds great.
And also the original Game Boy and Game Boy Color had pretty good headphone out.
They do.
Yeah.
They do it. They did and do.
Yeah.
I do want to mention some alternative devices that only one of these or a couple of these that I've used, but they didn't come into our estimation for reasons.
Right.
First up is the Revo K101 for about $130 was the MSRP.
Yeah.
This thing was available for a while. You might still see it mentioned from time to time or find one floating around on eBay. I don't think they manufacture them anymore. It was basically just GBA clone hardware that came with a flash drive or a flash cart, pardon me. And while it was functional, the buttons felt really weird and the speaker isn't great.
Right.
And so everything sounds weird. Beyond that, it's decent, but it's gotten hard to find. And for the $130 price point, I would probably just go DS Lite or
you have one of
AGS
these?
101. I did have one of these for a brief while.
Yeah.
The sound was so bad and the buttons were so annoying that I got rid of it.
How would you compare its quality to the Retro Duo portable?
I would say we was on par.
Okay.
Probably
'Cause that
the
thing's
buttons were very
trash.
bad because the buttons were very bulbousy.
Right.
And they hurt my thumbs.
Ugh.
And then the sound was just fucked.
That sucks.
It was bad. There are lots and lots of Android gaming handhelds. There are the GPD XD, the JXD. They all handle GBA great. I have a GPD XD. Whether or not you should get one depends on whether or not you want the other features those kinds of devices offer.
Right.
I love my GPD XD. I don't use it a lot.
Yeah.
If I'm being blatantly honest. But if you're already in the market for something like that, it'll play GBA just fine.
Right.
You have the BitBoy and the BitBoy Pocket Go, which people like these a lot. It's $40. I haven't used one, but for $40, even if it just kind of runs GBA mostly all right, then it's not a bad price at $40. So I'd say that's around the same price point as a DS Lite, and I'm sure it does other things. So you might look into it if you're in the sub $50 range. Original model DS we talked about. Original model GBA and GBSP 001 we have covered at length.
Right.
So yeah, my recommendations, if you're like, oh no, I really want to go nuts and get a GameCube and do the whole connectivity and peripheral thing,
Right.
and the e-reader and plug it up to Animal Crossing and put my chows from Sonic Advance or from Sonic DX into Sonic Advance,
Right.
then GameCube and a GBA SP 101.
Right.
Or maybe if you already have a GameCube, then a GBA SP 101 and some link cables.
And if you already have a Wii, you could also use that not for playing your GBA
Indeed.
games on the TV, but for at least
Correct.
linking with GameCube games.
Right. But if you're just like, no, I just want to play GBA carts, then DS Lite's a great option. Or maybe
Right.
if you say, hey, I've got all my GBA carts, but I don't have any hardware anymore, what should I get? Just go DS Lite.
Right.
They're $50.
Yeah.
Let's talk recommended titles.
Mhm.
I recommend basically all of them, the whole library.
Entire library, especially the Mary-Kate and Ashley games.
Especially those. I have the Game Boy Color Mary-Kate and Ashley Pocket Planner.
I know.
It. I know you won't shut up about it. First up, all of the Super Mario and Final Fantasy ports.
Yeah. All excellent.
These are not necessarily the definitive versions of their respective titles due to some of the limitations of the GBA, most notably sound.
Yeah.
And that people had some issues with Yoshi's Island, but it's still playable.
Now, there's some fan mods that fix some of the sound issues, at least on the Final Fantasy games. I want to say I've seen them for some of the Mario games as well. And if you patch them in, you can even play it on original hardware, and it sounds good. So
if you're on an option where you're playing ROMs, you can patch those ROMs and fix them up. I do recommend, as far as Pokemon games, Leaf Green and Fire Red. Even if you're buying original cartridges, these ones are still pretty affordable. I think I paid like $35 for my copy of Leaf Green, which in the realm of Pokemon games is very affordable. The big Pokemon game on GBA was Emerald. I didn't love Ruby and Sapphire to begin with, and Emerald is about $80 to $100 right now. And Leaf Green and Fire Red are great. They're remakes of the original games. And if you have not played the original Pokemon games, Red and Blue, since you were a kid, then don't go back to them. They're rough. I would say if you're like, hey, I want to play old school Pokemon, Leaf Green and Fire Red are essential titles. They are fantastic versions of these original games. Even better than I would rate them better than a lot of the later Pokemon games that came out after them. And then I would recommend all the strategy RPGs. For some reason, the GBA is just like a hotbed of strategy RPGs. Right. Final Fantasy Tactics Advance, Tactics Ogre, Advance Wars 1 and 2, Fire Emblem. There's a Napoleon game. There's that one game that's basically XCOM with little chibi cartoon characters.
Onimusha
Tactics, which is actually all right. I was playing it. It's okay. There are tons of strategy RPGs. If you're coming to the Game Boy and you're going, well, maybe I don't need to play ports of Super Nintendo games that I already owned or whatever, it's a great system for strategy RPGs. Yeah. Also, the Sonic Advance games. Oh yeah. There are 3 of them, and it's just 2.5 games of great gameplay. They're very fun. They're very good.
Nice.
They feel like fast classic Sonic in an era when it felt like we weren't gonna ever get fast classic Sonic again.
But don't get the Game Boy Advance port of Sonic 1. Don't do that.
Yeah, don't do that.
That's a mistake.
You want Sonic Advance. Correct. 1.
Yeah, not Sonic Genesis. Sonic Advance.
Yeah. Which also includes a Chow Garden.
Yeah.
I'd also highly recommend the Metroids, both Zero Mission and Fusion. Fusion is a controversial title, but it's still a very good game.
Yeah.
And Zero Mission is the best Metroid they ever made.
It's up there. It is a very, very good game. Excellent.
Notice how strategically Saturn chooses his words. It's up there for wrongies, I guess.
I also I'm gonna echo a lot of that as far as those. I'm also gonna say the Castlevanias, Aria of Sorrow especially was excellent.
And it gets shit, but I like Circle of the Moon. It's a fun game. It's
fine.
Is it as good as Aria or Harmony? No.
Yeah,
but it's good.
Right. I would also throw in both of the Klonoa puzzle platformers on GBA. They're very different than Klonoa 1 or 2 as far as, because those are more just standard platforming, and the GBA games are very much puzzle platforming, and it's I really dig on them. I think they're worthwhile. Both the WarioWare games on GBA are goofy and dumb and fun. And also there's a shit ton of Game Boy Color games and Game Boy Black and White games. And a lot of Game Boy Color games came out after the GBA came out, and some of them even have specific GBA functionality, like the Zelda Oracles games, and
they just wouldn't quit making them,
right? And of course, you filled in for me that I would probably recommend Mother 3, which I do, but I actually have never played it on any handheld system, so I can't really recommend it there. But it is a good game. It's very good.
And I could, Gradius Galaxies, because I've been playing that this week. I could really talk about the GBA library for hours.
Yeah, I was trying to shy away from imports, though it isn't region locked, so there's no reason to really shy away from imports. Barring fan translations, a lot of them are difficult to approach.
Yeah. The Fire Emblem's also very good strategy RPGs.
Excellent.
I do want to talk about peripherals briefly because as our listener feedback stated, Elton and Daps wrote in and was like, hey, look at all these peripherals.
Yeah.
The GBA does have many accessories, but I would say just for the purposes of just enjoying the GBA library and what it has to offer,
Right.
I don't know that I'd say that any of them are vital to that enjoyment.
Right. The closest I would say would be either a link cable if you have someone else to play with, or a GameCube link cable if you're going to play one of those few things that interact with it.
And even then, I've explored most of the GameCube connectivity functionality. I don't know that I'd say that any of it's really vital. If you're a big GBA and GameCube nut like I am, then yeah, it's fun to have, and the cable's not that hard to get.
But Justin, what about the e-reader?
Oh no, the e-reader. I forgot. The only game I think that used is Animal Crossing the only game that used the e-reader connected to your GameCube?
That I know of, yeah.
I think that's the only one. That might be peak.
Actually, I think a Mario Party game might have.
Animal Crossing might be peak Nintendo ridiculousness, where it's like, well, you need your Game Boy hooked up with your e-reader to your GameCube that has its dedicated custom Animal Crossing memory card.
The weirdest I got was because I did check out the e-reader functionality on Animal Crossing, but the weirdest I got was when I was trying to get the E levels on Mario Advance 4. And I only had one GBA at the time, but I had my Game Boy player on my GameCube. So I loaded up the game on my GameCube and then linked it to my Game Boy, which had the e-reader in it, and had to scan all my dot codes that way. And it took forever.
Oh, I also meant to put on my list a Bomberman Tournament.
Oh, yeah. Some of
like
the Bomberman games on there were good.
It's like a Zelda-y Bomberman adventure game.
Yeah, also everybody always recommends the Mega Man Zero games on there.
Also fantastic. Well, I would recommend the Zero Collection. It fixes a lot of the issues from the Zero games.
Also, the Mega Man Battle Network games were just immensely popular when they came out.
And expensive. Very expensive.
Are they now?
Oh, yeah.
I've got the first three.
I've been trying to find some copies, but, you know.
Damn.
I do want to talk about bootlegs, and really I could do a whole episode on bootlegs because I had to spend a lot of time learning about them. Yeah. For the most part, the current generation of bootlegs will function just fine on original hardware.
Right.
They're often significantly more affordable at about $4 a pop on AliExpress. And as long as they do not feature real-time clock mechanics like Pokemon Emerald, they will work fine forever, basically. That said, you should learn to identify bootlegs, because the problem isn't that there are tons of GBA bootlegs that are affordably priced, that very many include fan translations like Mother 3 and some of the Fire Emblems that didn't come here that you can get on original cartridges for $4 or $5.
Right.
Awesome. The issue is that people sell them as original games.
Right. And that's a problem.
And the issue is that they are so close to the originals that many, many, many people do it unwittingly.
Right.
And
like GameStop.
Yeah. While, yes, if you want to get a $5 bootleg of Fire Emblem because you don't want to pay $50 for the cart, which is what it goes for, then sure, that's your decision. But I don't want anybody to pay $50 for a bootleg.
Right.
Because it ain't worth that much. You do keep an eye out if you're buying games on eBay. Look for anything that says like reproduction or anything that's vaguely worded, because people do try to sneak it in there.
Also, if they say brand new but only show the cartridge itself.
Yeah, that's another big one.
Yeah.
Especially if it's in that little plastic clamshell that no GBA games actually came with.
Yeah.
That we all bought after the fact, but they didn't come with them.
Right.
So as far as like identifying bootlegs, there are a couple different things. You can look at the height and texture of the GBA logo on the cart. That's when you kind of need to look at side by side to know what to look for.
Right.
Some people also say to look at the pins and look for the Nintendo copyright information above the pins, but the current generation has that information in the correct font. The only identifier that I have personally discovered that I have never seen on a bootleg ever, and I have bought a lot of GBA games this year in 2020. I mean, a lot.
Yeah.
Is most North American, at least, and I believe other territories, but I buy North American games.
Right.
they had a 2-digit number physically imprinted on the label, the actual sticker label on the cart. It's a 2-digit number, and it's pressed into the sticker.
So it's like a little indentation.
Little indent, and it'll just be a 2-digit number. It would be 12, and it'll be to the right side of the sticker. I have never seen a bootleg with that ever one time. And so far for me, as of November 2020, that has been a reliable identifying feature. But I will say that not all games were printed with that 2-digit number. I have noticed 2 that did not have it thus far.
Do you remember which ones?
Searching. I do not remember which ones. But I've seen 2, and I believe they were online too. So it's
hard to say.
It's hard to say. But a lot of sellers, you'll notice they will, because when you take a picture of it, you can't see the indent dead on. A lot of sellers, when they're selling GBA cartridge, they'll open it and you can look at it. Right. Bootlegs will have a big black spot.
Yeah.
That's basically this glue. It's called potting.
Yeah.
That they put on the PCB to hold all the parts on. Nintendo never officially used potting on any boards. So if they show you the circuit board of your GBA game, and it's got potting, that's a bootleg.
Right.
So buy it if you want it, but I wouldn't pay more than $10 for it.
Right.
Additionally, a lot of sellers will kind of take a picture of it tilted at an angle in the light so you can see the 2-digit number.
Right.
Don't be shy to ask people to do that, because I've noticed a lot of people buying GBA games. They're like, man, I'm trying to... We've had these discussions in our Discord. I've talked to people that are like, yeah, I want to buy this game. I can't tell if it's real or not. I don't want to ask them if they can open it because I don't think they have a tri-wing screwdriver. And I was like,
wait,
look,
you mean everybody doesn't have one of those laying around?
I know, it's ridiculous. I actually had to buy one to verify my GBA games. So look for that 2-digit number, at least as of 2020. Maybe the next crop of bootlegs will have it. I don't know, but I've not seen it yet. And then once you learn to notice the actual GBA logo on the cart, the differences between the original version, which is very flat on the plastic, and the bootleg, which is very raised and sharp lettered, you can identify that one real quick.
I miss the old original Game Boy bootlegs that all just said game on the top.
They still sell those.
Oh, those are so great.
Game Boy Color bootlegs have progressed very, very little.
Yeah, I used to work at a game store that was right next to the airport back in the early 2000s, and we would frequently get people who had come from overseas and be like, "Hey, can I sell you all these Game Boy games from my country? It's region free. It doesn't matter." And if we had a new guy working, if it was in our system already, if it was a game that we would carry, he'd just immediately buy them, and then I'd come in later and we'd have all these game cartridges.
Game branded Game Boy games.
I'd be like, "Come on, dude, what are you even doing?"
As far as final thoughts, the GBA is one of my absolute favorite systems of all time. It feels just retro enough to kind of scratch that game, that retro game itch, but it's also recent enough to still feel, modern. There's modern amenities in these games.
Right.
Thankfully, GBA emulation is in a really good spot, and even the original hardware, modded or otherwise, is still very available. It's still relatively affordable at the $50 to like $120, $130 range.
Right, and there's just such a ton of amazing games on the platform.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
it's fantastic.
Not even just the GBA games, but also some of the older Game Boy games, which haven't necessarily aged as well. But there's still some real gems out there. Or if you go the other direction and get a DS Lite, there's tons of good DS games that you can jump onto if you're going that route. So there's if you haven't already dug into the library, there's so much waiting for you. That's just for sure absolutely worth it.
So go play GBA games. Go buy you a DS Lite.
Right.
Play GBA games. It's great. I will say I thought of it. I have mostly noticed hinge issues on the earlier models DS Lites because they came out with the white ones,
right? And
then they did the revised ones that were like the blue and black and the red and black.
Yeah,
I see white ones broken more often. That's not verifiable data.
Right.
Don't take that to the bank or anything.
Yeah, I had an original white one, and that was the one where the shoulder button died. And now I've got the black and blue, and it's been great.
I have 2 black and blues. I've played them to death. I've had no issues with them so far. So I did just want to mention that if you're in the DS Lite market, you might try to find one of the, because the later colors came out, the color variations came out later.
Right.
I don't remember where the pink one fell in. That was after.
That was fairly early, but I don't think it was at launch. It
Yeah,
may have
I
been
want
a
to say it
launch.
was before they came out with the black ones, the black and blue and black and
It
red.
was way before that.
Yeah, so I would say if you're shopping for a DS Lite, look for one of the ones that are black bottomed and then they have a colored top. So
Right.
I think they only did black and red and black and blue.
That I remember, yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember any other colors. They never did a green or anything. Would have been nice. Anyway, thanks for listening to the show. We have wonderful people that support the show at
Yes.
patreon.com/Retro Warriors, where they get cool things like Talking Wizards and After Hours and early uncut
access,
versions of the
yeah.
show where we talk about Hanna-Barbera cartoons for 20 solid minutes.
Sometimes that happens, yes.
And this particular episode was brought to you by the following patrons: Elson Raves,
Sean Gavin,
Captain Koloff,
sponsored by Honest Bob's Dildo and Butt Plug Emporium.
and we thank them for their sponsorship. Dig Dougie,
Chris Forbes,
George McBain,
Video Rangers Podcast,
Keo Killa,
and David Nethery.
all wonderful patrons that support us financially.
Indeed.
We would like it if you did that also a lot. Thanks. If you don't want to, you can rate and review us on iTunes, or you can do both. I'm not going to stop you. I'm not in charge of you. You can do whatever you feel
He's
like.
not your dad.
I'm not your dad.
Unless, of course, your daughter later listens to this when she's older. Then
There you
he
go.
is your dad, and you should listen to him.
Anyway, thanks so much for listening. We'll be back next week. And as always,
Let us cling together.